All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. We're glad you could join us on Global Accessibility Awareness Day for this panel. This is presented by Lullabot and Dubbot. Lullabot is a strategy design and Drupal development agency, and we do websites for higher education, government agencies, and enterprise organizations. And Dubbot is web accessibility and governance software that works as hard as you do. So it's a simple software suite that helps organizations optimize their websites for better user experience. And their goal is to take the complexity out of web accessibility and quality assurance. So I'm going to first hand it off to Maggie to introduce herself, and we will go down the line from there. Oh, you're muted.
You think I'd have that down by now. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you could join us today. My name is Maggie Vaughn. I am the content marketing practitioner for Dubbot. My background is in higher education. I was the website administrator at a public university here in Virginia for about 18 years. And then my last 6 years tenure there, I was the digital accessibility program manager. I am a certified accessibility core competencies professional. I am a Caucasian female with short gray hair. I'm wearing a bright blue shirt and black rimmed glasses, and I do wear hearing aids, and my pronouns are she and her.
All right, Kat, what about you?
Unmute. Hi, my name is Kat Shaw. I am a senior front-end developer at Lullabot. I've been there for 3.5 years. My background is that I worked for local government at Douglas County, Kansas as a webmaster. That was my title. And that's actually how I got into accessibility, was with local government after seeing a blind user speak at one of our user groups. So that was actually a very eye-opening experience for me. And now I've become an advocate and I really enjoy it. I am CPACC certified. And if you have questions, feel free to ask me. I am a biracial woman. I have a hat on. I have glasses that are kind of half black rimmed, wearing a jacket and a brown shirt, and that's about it. Oh, and my pronouns are she, her.
Thank you. And last but not least, Tyler. Oh, let me unmute you here.
There we go. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Hello, my name is Tyler Malone. I'm an accessibility specialist. My background is straight accessibility. I actually attended the university that Maggie used to work at. We met there, and she's been my mentor through building my career in accessibility. I did some freelance testing. I've done both user testing and accessibility testing, manual and automated. I currently work for a small IT consulting agency as a full-time accessibility specialist. I'm studying for, but have not taken the test for WAS certification. I'm a Caucasian male. I have a beautiful, luxurious beard and a wonderful Asian-style background screen. And my pronouns are they, them.
Right. If at any time you all have questions, you can use the chat feature, and we will try to get to as many as we can. So feel free to just drop them in as they come to you. And we will kick things off with Tyler. So Tyler, you are visually impaired, and so can you tell us about that impairment? How long that's been the case?
Yeah, sure. So I'm visually impaired. I have partial vision in both eyes. Only only peripheral in my right, central and peripheral in my left. I lost my vision when I was about 7 years old, so 20 years ago now. I had hydrocephalus and optic nerve atrophy as a result of that in both eyes. So I can see shapes and colors and a lot of detail. For me, the biggest issue is things that are far away or things that are very small. I read both large print and Braille. I use a variety of different assistive technology software, not really devices. So for instance, on desktop, I'll use NVDA by NV Access and Screen Magnifier as needed. And on mobile, I'll use usually an iPhone with VoiceOver. Android is just not as good of an environment, so I prefer Apple. They keep things a little cleaner.
All right. And what kind of barriers do you encounter while using assistive technology that you would advise accessibility testers to test for?
Yeah, the biggest barriers I encounter are usually the ones that you don't run into at first if you're just a regular person without a disability. So for me, the biggest thing is usually programmatic labeling on things like forms, controls, images, etc. Any interactive content or media. Testers tend to overlook the stuff that you add attributes that you're not going to visually see. People prioritize visual layout rather than functionality. So a good example would be if I'm filling out a form, you can add a label that's visually apparent and placeholder text. And you can have the form fields and you can jump between them using focus, but they might not have a visual focus indicator. So people just using keyboard won't know what's going on there. Or you jump into a text field and it doesn't announce a label because you haven't put the for attribute on your label element. So now someone with a screen reader who's listening is just going to hear text box edit. They're not going to know what they're filling out. For images, it's alt attributes. We really, really need those descriptions so that we know what's going on in images. If they're not decorative, they need to be described, and we need to know why they're there in addition to what they say. I also encounter a lot of screenshots of documents or PDFs that are scanned where I have no way of reading it because there's no actual data. It's just an image. I think those are the biggest ones. Those are the ones that if I could sit down with every developer in the world, I'd go fix this first because this is going to give the most functionality to assistive technology for multiple user groups.
Now, Maggie and Kat, based on some of that, what are some tips that we can share for organizations to begin improving that type of thing that they could maybe even start today?
I would suggest first off is looking at not only the things that Tyler just mentioned, but some of your low-hanging fruit, things that are easily corrected, and some of those things are exactly what Tyler said. Proper labeling for your forms is pretty easy. You can build a really nice form in semantic HTML, and that's a beautiful language. And looking at things like your color contrast and making sure that you do have your alt text in place and it's written properly and it's written well. And you know, taking time to do some testing through an automated tool like DubBot, but making sure that you also go and do your manual testing too, because automated testing can't capture everything. Kat, you want to add to some of that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you have both said, and I think that, like you were talking about semantic HTML, you know, not making things more complicated, like trying to make a div a button, just use a button. Just keep it simple, stupid. So just going with the semantic HTML is the way to go, not using ARIA unless you absolutely have to use ARIA. And then when you do, use it properly. Definitely focusing on the pages first that are visited the most on your site. So obviously your home page, any pages you have forms on. One thing that's really helpful is as long as your site uses the same CSS for things like your forms and your tables and things like that, if you fix the CSS for your forms, and your tables and things that should hopefully fix it for, across your site in some ways. Obviously, it's not going to fix your form markup when it comes to the fields, but there's things you can do that will, be one fix, and it can fix a lot of things and have a cascading effect.
So a lot of these things seem fairly straightforward. So what are some of the reasons that you all have heard from clients why they're not doing this stuff or why they're not investing in web accessibility?
I think the biggest reason I
Who wants to
hear
go
is,
first?
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Just time and money. Those are the biggest reasons. But I think a lot of it is they're afraid of doing it. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to approach it. And I think if you kind of help them through the process, that can help. But there are definitely people that there are people that refuse to do it. And then there are people that are just either nervous about doing it or aren't sure how to go about approaching it.
Yeah, I think some people get stymied because it can be they're looking at it as if it's it has to all be done at one time, and that can be extremely intimidating because accessibility is a lot. And so I feel that those of us in the accessibility field, part of our responsibility is to help educate people to the fact that no, it doesn't all have to be done at one time. That the adage progress over perfection is the most important thing is that you get started. And if it, it's a little bit at a time, it's one step forward, one step forward.
Yeah, and related to that, Tyler, have you ever visited a website that you thought was 100% accessible?
Oh, I would say no. There are a lot of websites that are very good. I think calling any website 100% accessible is kind of a misnomer, though. I've encountered websites where they'll be 100% quote unquote accessible one week, and then they run through an update cycle and everything's broken, or something they're relying on gets updated and then that's broken, and that one component then becomes accessible. I would say that a good example of a website that does pretty well is the CDC website, actually, cdc.gov. I watched them at the beginning of the pandemic almost fix 90% of their issues in real time. And I think when a company gets a lot of scrutiny like that, when people start using it and start going, hey, this is broken, that's when they're at their best for sure. But even then, I'm one person, so I would be afraid of saying this is 100% accessible because in a week it might be inaccessible. Another specialist might find something I miss, that sort of thing.
So yeah, it seems to be more like an attitude and a process as opposed to a race to the finish line.
Yeah, anyone who declares they're 100% accessible is probably misinformed. I would say it in a very nice way. I just don't think it's realistic.
Mm-hmm. Well, what issue do you all find that you encounter the most? What accessibility issue?
For me, it'd be keyboard accessibility issues, which automatically translate to a screen reader. So people need to realize that, but just not being able to navigate through maybe a main navigation with your keyboard, or just keyboard focus visibility, just a lot of different keyboard traps, just a lot of different issues with keyboard navigation. And that's something that's actually really easy to check for with just tabbing through with your keyboard and using the arrow keys, as long as you know what the steps are to do that. So, and just knowing what those standards are and how to fix those and things are really important. Just so that's what I would say.
I think for me, one of the things that I see a lot is color contrast. And I feel like a lot of that is because organizations have their branding colors. And a lot of times when those things are being determined and tested and all of the things, the one test that they're missing is the accessibility test. They do the user groups and the focus groups and this color, and we want to gradient here and we want this shade and all that. And I understand what goes into all of that. But including the accessibility testing along with all those other testings is it's critical, it's necessary, it's mandatory in order to get that color contrast right.
Yeah, I'd say the thing I encounter the most is probably custom components where the information the accessibility API relies on to convey what's going on or to focus, interact with an element, that's just been stripped out. I work with a lot of very small clients that use builders like WordPress or any other one, maybe Squarespace, where there's a lot of custom components built into it, and nobody's doing the accessibility testing. It's not part of the project workflow. So I'll jump through an entire web page, and everything will just be an element that focuses and announces as clickable, and that that doesn't work. There's no information except that I might be able to interact with the element.
And you said that you found that on some of these websites as a service, things like Squarespace.
Not as
well.
much Squarespace anymore in particular. They've been doing a pretty good job of fixing. When I first encountered Squarespace in college, and it was a bit of a mess, but in a general sense, just across many different websites, that's probably the thing I encounter the most.
Okay.
I would also mention links.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Just titling links, just labeling them properly, having them be meaningful. If you see lots of read mores and they don't have any kind of like an ARIA label or just anything, that's not helpful to a screen reader user in any way, because for them they're just seeing a list of read more, and that's not helpful. So knowing how to mark up links properly is a big one.
And to your point, Kat, having descriptive link text, that's one of a really, really good example where accessibility is great for everybody. Because as a sighted person, when I'm scanning that website and those links have been done in descriptive text, it helps me decide where I want to go because I know what I'm going to find if I click on it. So I really love that example.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting topic too, because when we're talking about improving accessibility, we're not just trying to improve the quality of life of people with disabilities necessarily, but as a consequence, other things are improved as well. Is there anything else we want to speak to with that?
Well, I think the biggest example would be like curb cuts. That was an accessibility, not a web accessibility, but an accessibility fix for people that use wheelchairs, being able to get on and off of sidewalks. And that helps people in a lot of ways, people that use carts when they go grocery shopping, or people that have children and they have them in their strollers. And so I know for me, I actually have a really strong light sensitivity, so I use dark mode. So those settings and being able to actually make text larger at times is really impactful for me. So there's a lot of features with accessibility that were meant for accessibility to make things accessible for people with disabilities that end up impacting people that you might not put in that classification. So it's great.
Yeah, and I think there's also the very classic example of captioning with your videos, which as somebody who's hearing impaired, I use it all the time. But I have friends and family members that their hearing is great and they will use it. My daughter uses it when she's on the metro, or uses it if you're the classic example of being in the library and things have to be quiet. You don't have your earbuds. You can turn on the closed captioning and still enjoy the video.
Yeah, that's all a good point, because lots of people, based on the context, are going to have different needs and limitations, even if it's just very temporary, like a mother who's holding two kids in both arms or whatever. So, so Tyler, when you encounter a website
Mhm.
which provides an important service to either a consumer or especially like a government agency that isn't accessible, what message does that send to users, do you think?
Ooh, yeah. This is something I talk about with clients a lot. Unfortunately, I think it sends the message that we don't matter. It's really rough, especially for essential services, especially during the pandemic when we were all kind of frazzled and trying to, still get our IDs updated, travel places, make sure we have our essential services covered. There was a really big issue with a lot of online services not being fully accessible or even being accessible at all, and it kind of speaks to where people put us in society, that we're kind of always the last thing you think of. There's a huge push in the industry to make accessibility an essential part of planning a project right now, and I think the fact that we don't have that kind of it makes me sad. It's a shame. It highlights the fact that we really need to be better. We need to be more educated, and we need to be more open-minded to not just the needs of the demographic that's most closely focused on, but of anyone who might encounter our service or a website.
And I think that, just like we were talking here, I've just met Tyler not too long ago, but I consider him a friend now. And, we have friends, we have loved ones, we have family, we have people we work with. We all know somebody that has a disability. Quite honestly, I think a lot of people have disabilities that wouldn't put themselves in a group that says I have a disability. And then you obviously have temporary disabilities. Lots of people have that. I had one with my shoulder. I just think that the companies and organizations and stuff that just dismiss an entire group of people are not only missing out on a huge demographic of potential customers and clients, but they're also losing out on the supporters of those people. And I don't think they get that. For me, if I go to a site that's not accessible or is difficult, I'm just going to go to another site. There's plenty of other places to go. I'm not even going to waste my time. So
I agree with that 100%. And not only do they miss out on bringing in potential new customers and whatnot, they also put themselves at a very high risk of their damaging their reputation and putting their brand at risk. And we know where the dominoes go with that. So I absolutely agree with all of that.
We have a couple of questions that came through the chat. Pamela asks, I cannot get a good answer on how to list an email. I've been told two different ways. Is the best way to just link the person's name with their email, or should we list the email in parentheses after that as well? Anyone have any thoughts on that one?
I've done it several different ways. I think the key is that the email address is linked so that a person can click on it and go and email to somebody. A lot of sites have the email address written out and as a link that goes to the email address, I would say. Some sites will have a person's name like Cat Shaw, and Cat Shaw is linked out to the email address. So I think, I don't know, Maggie and Tyler, what do you think?
I mean,
I'm going to defer to Tyler. I'm going to defer to Tyler simply because I'm interested in that answer from you from the screen reader perspective, especially if there is, some people's names are a little bit complicated. And how do you respond to that?
Well, I would say that my biggest priority is the functionality is there. So I'd agree that making sure that links to the email is the most important thing. I tend to prefer having the link and then having the email itself in plain text, because if I need to write out the email, I want to be able to iterate over it with my keyboard, and I don't necessarily need to hear all of that information in the link, because the link is just going to do the thing I need it to do. But having a copy of it in plain text allows me to interact with it without having the link functionality, so I won't accidentally open it, and it allows me to go through and type it by hand if I need to. But both should be visible, I would say. As long as both are visible and you can operate a functionality that triggers the email, then that's what you need.
And if I can, I'd like to just add one more thing to that. It was a really good question. When adding content or contact information to your pages, it's really important that you add not just the email address, but also a phone number. For some people that may have difficulty speaking, or maybe just people that your particular language is not their first language, having an alternate way to communicate with you really it's helpful to them. It's and going back to what message it sends the message that you're in our mind, and we're thinking about you and giving you both ways to communicate with us.
And making sure you have the correct markup for a linked telephone number is also very important. So that's another thing to mention, is that with the email and the telephone, to make sure that you look up the proper markup for both of those so that they work properly.
And we have one question regarding closed captioning. What are your thoughts if the closed captioning is provided below the video and not in the video? It's not ideal, but this questioner has had a couple situations where they didn't have an option.
So it sounds to me like we're talking about a transcript then, rather than captioning there.
Yeah, like a open caption and not a closed caption. So I will say, as somebody who uses captions all the time, captioning, like alt text, is an art, and I prefer my captioning to be real time. I want it in the video, and because if I have to move my eyes over to a transcript over here, then you're losing the visual over there, and so you're not getting that same experience as somebody who doesn't need to use captioning at all.
I agree with that. I've seen, I've had situations where the captioning was separate from the video, and I think that it's difficult to follow a video if you're watching it and have the captioning be separate and you're having to look down and look up. So the whole point of the captioning being within the video is what's helpful. If you have a choice between like no captioning at all and that, I guess that's a better than nothing kind of situation, is what I would say. Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I would agree with what you two have said. The closest equal experience is always best. We want We want our users to have ideally the same experience that anyone else has is. So the best way to get to that is what you should do. I would suggest anytime you can also providing a transcript, because there are other users that will benefit from that. Deafblind users are left out a lot, and they actually benefit a lot from having a descriptive, comprehensive transcript below the video. Generally, I would suggest putting those in accordion so you can expand and collapse them, or making them a downloadable file. But where possible, yeah, I would do closed captioning inside the video.
And on that subject, I know that YouTube is widely used as a people's way to get videos and to use videos, and closed captioning is an option, and they create an automatic closed caption and transcript. But I would say that it's really important. I think that's actually a great thing, but it's very important for you to go back through your video and edit the captions and edit the transcript so that you make sure that the text is synchronized, like Maggie was saying, synchronized with the text that's coming on the screen, so that it makes sense to the person watching the video or the person, reading the transcript.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to follow up. You said that's open captioning, Maggie, instead of closed captioning. I'd never actually thought about the naming of that. I'm just curious, like what's
Open captioning would be what Tyler was describing, would be a transcript. It would be,
it's just a transcript.
yeah, your
Okay.
video is here, and then you have this, a block of text over here. So it's not, it's not. And closed captioning it's closed because it's within the video.
Within the video. Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why I just never even thought about the name.
Well, good. Then we are
Interesting.
accomplishing our goal and learning and teaching. Yay.
So we've talked a little bit about how it's a shame how accessibility hasn't really been built into the process of making websites, or hasn't been part of an intuitive part of that, and how much of a shame that can be. What are some things that we can do to ensure that accessibility requirements are considered throughout product development and throughout that whole cycle? How can we start encouraging stakeholders, encouraging everyone involved to begin considering this?
For me, it's get your users on your development team. Get members of the community that you serve with your accessibility. Get them involved. Get them as members of your development team, of your design team. Get them involved in the ideation process. Have them involved every step of the way. And diversify as much as you can with people with disabilities. Okay. And if you can't actually hire the people and bring them, and make sure that you partner with groups and organizations that you can have people come in and do that testing for you.
I can say that for me, the important part is that whatever size organization that you work for, it's important to have buy-in from the top all the way to the bottom and in between. So with leadership, it's important for them to make sure that there's training and certifications, and that standards are accepted, and like the WCAG standards and the ATAG standards and things like that, that they're accepted and adopted by the agency. Design team, for instance, can do things like annotated designs, and they can have people do accessibility audits on the designs to check for things like color contrast, which is a big one, spacing, things like that. And then the development team can just, during their development process, do automated and manual testing during their whole cycle. And QA can then, use some of those same tools to make sure that those are checked. So I think the more eyes on things, the better, is the important part.
Yeah. So let's talk about some tools to help with this. What are some quick tools that can give us a reading on how accessible our sites are, and can give us some next steps so we know where our gaps are?
I heard of this tool called Dubbot. I think Maggie might.
That's a favorite of
Yeah.
mine.
I love it.
Did you want to speak on that one?
Excellent. Well, absolutely. Dubbot is a automated software as a service, and absolutely a great place, great tool to use to get started. Dubbot really does a really in-depth check. Again, you need automated and manual, but Dubbot does all your accessibility checks, and you can do custom policies where you can have it check against your style guide for your organization. All kinds of things beyond the accessibility that create the whole usability, accessibility, and increase that user experience. So absolutely, and just reach out if you want to talk to us about it. We'd be glad to help you with that. But yeah, thanks for the plug, Kat.
I will say, as both an accessibility specialist and a person living with disabilities, I've used Dubbot, and it's great. It really covers tons of the information you're going to need to make your website accessible.
That's great. And for me, I think the important part is to use great tools like Dubbot, but also to have a diversity of tools so that you're layering things so that it's not just one tool. So I use things like Arc Toolkit, Axe DevTools, HTML Code Sniffer, Lighthouse, and WebAIM's color contrast checker. So if I'm like working within a design, sometimes I'll use the Paciello color contrast checker, and sometimes I'll just copy and paste the hex values into the WebAIM color contrast checker to check things out and adjust the colors to get a good value. So those are some of the ones. There's a lot of great Chrome. I use Chrome, so there's a lot of great Chrome extensions for that. And when it comes to manual testing, the key is, I would say, just start out with keyboard testing. Like I said, just using the tab key to see if you can access all of the things on your page and if they're visible, and also to use the screen reader that you have. So if you have a Mac, you can use VoiceOver. If you have a Linux, you can use Orca. And if you have Windows, you can use, is it Navigator or Narrator? I can't remember. I think it's Narrator. Yeah.
Narrator.
Yeah. And there's also NVDA that you can download for Windows as well. And then there's obviously JAWS for Windows. So those are the important things that you can start out for manual testing and just go through the WCAG standards and kind of see what you can do.
It's important to note for things like screen readers. I've run into some resistance from developers who aren't sure why they would use it because they don't have a disability. You can put up a logging system on the screen for both JAWS and NVDA that will visually display it as a text readout what users are encountering from a programmatic perspective. So what I hear NVDA say when I tab around a page, you can read NVDA describe to you in a log that you can then save and look at during your testing process. I believe JAWS also has something similar that they're working on improving at the moment. And the last note would be just validators. Use an HTML validator. A lot of accessibility practices are also just good best practices.
Yeah, and there's a CSS validator as well. So, using that as well. Making sure all of your styling is done with CSS and not done inline so that people that have their own templates, within their browsers, maybe they want to change the color contrast to have it unique for them, or have larger text or whatever. If you don't have things done with CSS properly, then they won't be able to make those changes with their templates within their browsers, and those are important things to do.
All right. That's good to know about the screen reader log output. That's extremely useful.
I use it when I'm doing consulting, so I can screen share and show people. It's very, very helpful.
Yeah, I imagine. So we're going to start going through a few misconceptions here. And we're going to start off with PDFs because someone asked a question about PDFs. I've heard it before that it's assumed that all PDFs are accessible by default. So why is that a misconception, and what problems can you run into with PDFs?
So where do we start, friends? Wow.
You should tell that story. Well, I shouldn't put you on the spot, but that story about, the school, I'll just say that, is a great example of a PDF issue.
Yeah. Well, I can give an example. I hope I'm telling the right one. There's lots of them, Kat. Is PDFs? Well, the first problem would be, and Tyler mentioned this earlier, is when people scan in something, they scan it into PDF. It's not it's a PDF, but it's a giant image. Okay, those are completely useless in terms of trying to make them accessible, unless you want to do, alt text. That I can't get that much of my arms in there. But the source, if you make the PDFs are not accessible by default because they are created from a source document. So if your source document, let's just take a simple one like Word. If your Word document is not accessible, then your PDF is not going to be accessible. I've often had a lot of pushback about accessible documents because they didn't want to make them accessible because it would take too much work. And it's like, if you're creating the document in a proper structure to begin with, you are organically making it accessible. So putting your headings in the correct order, doing all those things, it's not more work if you're doing it correctly in the first place. And I've remediated so many PDFs. And people would always ask me, well, you have to do the undergraduate catalog. That must be so time consuming. I'm like, no, because it's text. Text is easy to remediate. It's getting into things like, and I'm pulling from my higher ed, the View book, the alumni magazines. It's like, oh, it's time for the alumni magazine. And I'm like, quick, where's my rock? I want to hide under it. Yeah, it's, and there's some really good tools for checking your PDF. Of course, Adobe Acrobat, start with that. Common Look is a good one for Windows. And again, a PDF is, you need to run your manual checks on them as well. That accessibility is all about is automated and manual testing, whatever the document is.
So yeah, our question was that they currently have thousands of inaccessible PDFs, including forms. So I could see the pain on your face. What?
My heart is hurting for you.
Yeah. What is a process to start to at least, or maybe just some words of encouragement?
Can I give some
But
advice?
what's the first step?
I
Yeah.
went through the
Please.
same thing when I worked at Douglas County. We had a lot of PDFs, and so what I did is I inventoried the PDFs and categorized them. So you had the scanned PDFs, you had PDFs that were converted from a Word doc or Excel or whatever they were converted from, and then you had just PDFs that were just, why were they PDFs in the first place? Because they had maybe 2 lines of text on them. So it was really about, okay, the scanned PDFs, they're junk. How do they need to be on the site? If not, we can get rid of them. If they really do need to be on the site, let's try to find the source document and do that. But a big part of it was actually seeing if we could convert some of those PDFs to HTML documents or web pages on the site, as opposed to keeping them as PDF documents. And so that was the first step, is trying to figure that out. And actually a lot of them that were originally PDF documents ended up becoming HTML documents, like the commission meeting agendas and minutes and things like that. Sometimes you can't help it and they have to be PDFs because of signatures and all of that kind of stuff. And when you run into that, the important part you have to do is have maybe like a head of a department or some specific people have Acrobat Acrobat, the full version Pro, and they'll have to use the accessibility checker, and they're going to have to go through and remediate every single document that has to go on the site, and fix things like tagging and images, which making sure that they have alt text, and it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do, making sure things are in a logical order. It's just a long list of things that you have to go through and remediate for PDF documents. So that's why it's always best to try to not have it be a PDF if you can, but if you have to, that's what you need to do. So
Yeah. And I agree with that 100%. It's always best to have it as HTML. That process that Kat just laid out for you, I would say to document that very well, because that will help you in your business case to present to your constituents and to management as to why PDF is not, it might be the quick and easy solution, but it certainly is not the accessible nor the sustainable solution. So I would document those hours, the person power required and things like that, and then attach some dollar signs or however best to make your case, to help you in the long run, not to have, the PDF become the standard.
+1. Totally agree on that.
So yeah, I'm hearing there's steps you can start taking now, but also if there are a lot of PDFs, that does signify some kind of process problem, some kind of cultural problem, because a lot of them just get created. Well, there's no place to put these, or what do we do with this information? Let's just make a PDF and put it on the website somewhere.
You can also classify, another thing we did is how far back do these go? What year do we want to say, okay, that's the cutoff? And I think we did like 3 years back, and anything older than that, we're going to make a historical document, because you have to keep documents when you're a government. And
Right.
That's what we did. And if a person wants to come in and look at it, they can come in and look at it, or we can send it or whatever. So
yeah, PDF is great for archival purposes. That's a perfect use for it. Or maybe sending something that needs to maintain formatting through certain channels or whatever. That's what PDF is for. It is it's a portable document format. So that's great. But as far as presenting web content, not so great.
All right, well, let's go to the next one. Another misconception. We've touched on this a little bit, but it takes too much time and money. So how do we answer that one?
You can scale. I feel like you can scale your accessibility remediation, I should say, depending on the size of your organization. So, when I was a webmaster, I was the only person. So, it really is about just trying to do what you can do to make it better than it was yesterday. So if you can't do everything, that's fine. Just try to add meaningful alt text and then work on color contrast and then work on things and with the automated scanners and start there and learn how you can make things better. That's very important. Put up Maggie, you were mentioning the accessibility statement is very important. Putting that up on your site, saying we're working towards making our site accessible. If you see any issues, here's how you can contact us to let us know, and we will do everything we can to fix it. Those are the kinds of things that are really important to do. And to try to have, if you have the bandwidth, try to have a team, like a small team that can work together.
I agree with that. Yeah, and having your accessibility statement, and have your accessibility statement, don't hide it 3 levels down. Have it in your footer. Have it right there on every single page, because that's the thing that tells people that you do care and that you are making changes, and that because you are asking them, please let us know, you're asking for that involvement. You're asking for that partnership with your website visitors, and that's really the way it should be, and it's really a really awesome thing to do for yourself and for your visitors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would harp on that. I want to cut it and say yes, that exactly. As a person with a disability, anytime something is wrong, if I don't immediately leave because I'm looking for something and I'm too frustrated to stay, I reach out a lot on my own time to a lot of companies. I'll look for an accessibility statement. I'll look for a contact email address, even if it's just accessibility@company.com. And I will go, hey, I'm having an issue. I really like what you're doing. I love your mission statement. I want you to be successful. I want to be part of this. Please fix these things so that I can use your website. And users are your most powerful tool, because the users are who you're developing for. And making it part of who you are and part of your culture. Announce it on social media. Ask everybody to help you. Make that accessibility statement and that contact info very, very visible, because your users are going to be the people who fight for you to be better and help you hold yourself accountable. And that's going to be powerful for making sure you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and we had an example of this just while we were practicing for this panel and doing a technology check with this webinar platform. It's not 100% accessible. In particular, the mute button isn't picked up by a screen reader. And so we reached out to Demio. And so, yeah, that's just how some things happen. Mm-hmm. And they were very apologetic and said they would definitely put that on their product feature list. So, or roadmap. That's what the word I was looking for. So yeah, sometimes that's just how stuff happens. You just crowdsource it, and a lot of people are going to tell you stuff, whether you want it or not. So, yeah, well, we're closing it on the end. So is there any final words or thoughts anyone wanted to add?
I'll say something. I have come across a lot of people that are, the whole, how do we get started? How do we keep up with, as quickly as technology changes, accessibility is going just like that. A few things that I would say that I hope will help you all is go to find conferences, webinars, get that education, start at your foundation if that's where you are. Start wherever you are, start there to continue the growth. And the most important thing that really helped me when I got started was I actively sought out my people. I sought out the people of like minds, the people that were seasoned professionals, and the people that were like me, who were I use this expression, tripping over rocks, trying to get up to speed and learn. They're going to be your most valuable resource, and they're like Kat said, just meeting Tyler friends, because we're advocating for the same thing, and you're going to run into a lot of the same barriers and issues, and having your people with you is going to make that process a lot better for you, and it's a great learning process.
I wholeheartedly agree with what she said. That's very important, is finding like-minded people that are interested in those things. If you can go in person, to going to camps and conferences related to accessibility, or like DrupalCon's coming up, and they have a lot of accessibility related talks, because Drupal's very accessibility forward, which is awesome. And also, there's a lot of virtual conferences. So if you can't travel, there's a lot of virtual conferences that you can attend that will have lots of different talks and things with different levels. So if you're a beginner, you can learn different things. There's lots of great resources out there. If you just look up the word accessibility, YouTube videos, articles, blogs, everything. So there's a lot of people that want to share their knowledge. So just start somewhere and see what you can learn, and look up DEQUE, DEQUE. Is that right? DEQUE. I think I'm wrong on that, but look up DEQUE, and they have a lot of great information on that site too. That's it.
Yeah, and I would just say too that get out of your comfort zone a little bit, and also just get to know some people who might have some issues with disabilities. I know one time I was tasked to train someone on the School for the Blind, and where I am in Louisville, Kentucky, and the user, she was completely blind, and it really made me appreciate. It was for a Drupal website. It really made me appreciate all the work that had gone into Drupal to make it to where she could navigate almost without any problems whatsoever. And it opened my eyes to definitely to another perspective that I hadn't thought of before. And that was even a WooCommerce website. So that was e-commerce as well. And so it was even an additional level of complexity. So, yeah.
I would say, don't be afraid to admit you're wrong or that you don't know something. And when somebody is yelling at you because they're upset that they can't access something, don't listen to the emotion, listen to the cry for help, because that's really what it is. We're asking for help because we're frustrated and we just want to be like everyone else. A lot of improvements get washed away in conflict. And this is an area where everyone wants to educate everyone else. We're here, like everyone else has said, we're here because we sought out a community that was understanding and compassionate and wanted to do something good. Everyone wants that. You just got to meet them on their terms and listen to what they have to say. I think that's the biggest thing that's helped this community in particular thrive and expand so rapidly.
That's nice. Very nicely said.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you to our panelists. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Again, this was presented by Lullabot and Dubbot. And let's see, we'll be doing more of these. None planned. Oh, we've tried to do at least one a year on Global Accessibility Awareness Day, but we will see. If you have any other questions that you didn't think of until after we closed it, as it happens often, just feel free to reach out via social media, and we'll do our best to
Awesome.
get you answers to those questions.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Rachel, yes,
Oh, links.
we will. Happy GAD Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.